In recent years, there's been a lot of talk of the universal basic income as a way to provide welfare to citizens in an economy where human labor is increasingly becoming less of a necessity due to increasing technological advancements in AI, machine learning, and automation. And there's an organization called the Institute for the Future, or IFTF, and they propose an alternative idea to help cope with the foreseeable income inequality and jobless economy, if you will, with an idea what's called the Universal Basic Assets, or UBA. And since I don't really know much about this idea, I want to describe what that is with the IFTF's exact quote. The UBA is a basic set of resources that every person is entitled to, from housing and healthcare to education and financial security, end quote. The article continues. Rather than just focusing on money, the IFTF divides assets into three categories. Number one, private assets, owned personally, such as housing, land, and money. Second, public assets, which are owned collectively and usually managed by a government, which can include anything from the police force to public art galleries and national parks. And third, open assets, owned neither by an individual nor the government, but by a defined group. Resources in this category are optimized by how open source software operates today. John Klippinger, founder of the Institute for Data-Driven Design, said this category usually evolves with society, giving the example of British common law. When I was reading that quote, it really made me think of like a advanced slash futuristic quasi-technological version of democratic socialism. Now today, for example, in most of the socialist countries like Sweden, Finland, Denmark, there are interesting parallels to what was described in that quote and what exists today. So for example, in not just those countries, but most modern countries, there are private assets like your house and your car. There are public assets like hospitals and universities. So in one way or another, it's not too different from what most advanced economies today operate on. But to me, what was really interesting is the idea of open assets, which is basically, well, they broadly described it as neither owned by the public or the individual. So one thing that comes to mind is possibly the internet as an open asset. No one really owns it. We all contribute to it in one way or another and try to make it better. And something that the vast majority of people and parties can all enjoy. So that was pretty interesting. But the article goes into some of the criticisms of such a blueprint for the future. And the IFTF knows very well that their ideas are still very much under development, and they look forward to providing more concrete proposals going forward. But for now, I kind of want to go over some of the most obvious ones, which the article lays out for us. Firstly, there's the issue of quantification. In order to distribute something equally, there must be a way of measuring it in order to assign the same amount to each individual. While this is fairly simple, with private assets, for example, money can be counted, land measured in feet, etc., it becomes murkier when applied to the IFTF's categorization of open assets. Secondly, and linked to the above point, while private and public assets lie within a country's borders, open assets don't. An example of this could be the air we breathe. So even if we find a way to quantify open assets, how will we be able to distribute resources that we do not own and cannot own? Finally, if a problem with UBI is that not everyone has equal financial management skills, then the same criticism can be applied to asset management. So those are some pretty interesting questions that are brought up for a lot of people who are questioning the legitimacy of this sort of idea. And to be honest, I thought the same thing, honestly, when I was reading through this article. And it gets a little murky, like the quote mentioned, when you're talking about distribution of assets. So for example, with money, it's pretty straightforward. You can give everyone a stipend every month. You can give everybody a house. You can give everybody pretty much anything. But when it comes to open assets, it gets much more murkier. So for example, on one hand, just defining an open asset is still an open question at this point. And even if we do decide that an open asset is something comparable to the internet, how do we distribute the internet? You really can't. You can only distribute access. So if that's the case, do we just nationalize the internet companies and provide everybody unlimited access? Or do we just pay everybody's internet bill? I don't know. And to be honest, I don't even know if this is the correct line of criticism that the experts have in mind when addressing the UBA. These are just some of my own questions that I have in mind, because I find this theory still very much undeveloped, however interesting it may be. The biggest question that comes to my mind, at least, is how does the government really afford to give all these things? Because I can understand how in many societies today, the government plays a very large role in the economy, provides education and healthcare, but a lot of these services are tax funded. So people are working, they're making money, and they are surrendering a chunk of their paycheck to these collective goods. Now, if most of the job reports turn out to be true and we have mass unemployment in the coming decades, how much harder will it be for the government to provide all of these assets, whether it be housing, schools, hospitals, etc.? That's just the first thing that kind of came to my mind. And it's not that I'm against progressive ideas and new ways of doing things, quite the opposite. But to me, at least, that seems like one mental barrier that I kind of can't get around right now. But like I said before, the team working for the IFTF, they know very well that this sort of blueprint for the future is nowhere near completion, and they have an entire team of people doing everything they can to produce ideas that are not only viable but economically sound, given the changes expected of tomorrow. And the article mentions that they're going to be doing a whole bunch of research and development involved in this sort of thing, and running experiments with the universal basic assets. Now, I have no idea what those are going to entail. I don't even know if they know what those are going to entail, but I'm sure they will show us what those are going forward. But at the end of the day, I thought this was a really interesting article. As someone who's very much passionate about the future, what society is going to look like tomorrow, emerging changes that are changing the world in profound ways, I thought this would be an excellent example of something to go over and share with you. Now, if you have any ideas related to this, any criticisms, any things you like or dislike about it, I'd really like to hear what those are in the form of a comment below. Our world is changing profoundly, and I think it's fair to say that we might need to consider solutions that we would have never thought before. Now, it may be this, maybe a UBI, or maybe the ideas that really create a better world for tomorrow haven't even been thought of yet. Maybe you will come up with that next idea. I'd love to hear what the idea is if you have it. But thank you so much for watching this video. Please like and subscribe to this channel if this is the type of content you're interested in, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later.